Shalom, and welcome back to day 45 of reading the Bible in 52 weeks. Woo! Lord, thank you so much for today. Guide me so you can reveal your truth. Amen. Let's go. And today we'll be reading Numbers 31 through 33. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Execute vengeance for the Israelites against the Mennonites. After that, you will be gathered to your people." So Moses spoke to the people, Equip some of your men for war. They will go against Midian to inflict the Lord's vengeance on them. Send 1,000 men to war from each Israelite tribe." So 1,000 were recruited from their Israelite tribe out of the thousands in Israel. 12,000 acquitted for what Moses sent 1,000 from each tribe to war. They went with Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, in whose care were the holy objects and signal trumpets. They waged war against Midian as the Lord had commanded Moses, and killed every male, along with the others slain by them. They killed the Mennonite kings, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, Reba, and 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. The Israelites took the Mennonite women and their dependents captive, and they plundered all their cattle, flocks, and property. Then they buried all the cities where the Mennonites lived, as well as their encampments, and took away all the spoils of war and the captives, both people and animals. They brought the prisoners, animals, and spoils of war to Moses, the priest Eleazar, and the Israelite community at the camp at the plains of Moab at the Jordan across the Jericho. Moses, the priest Eleazar, and all the leaders of the community went to meet outside the camp, but Moses became furious with the officers, the commanders, thousands of commanders and hundreds of who were returning from the military campaign. "Have you let every female live?" he asked them. Yet they are the ones who, at Balaam's advice, incited the Israelites to unfaithfulness against the Lord of the pure incident, so that the plague came against the Lord's community. So now kill every male among the dependents, and kill every woman who has gone to bed with a man. But keep alive for yourselves all the young females who have not gone to bed with a man. You are to remain outside the camp for 7 days. All of you and your prisoners who have killed a person or touched the dead are to purify yourselves on the 3rd day and the 7th day. Also purify everything: garments, leather goods, things made of goat hair, and every article of wood. Then the priest Eleazar came the soldiers who had gone to battle. "This is legal statute the Lord commanded Moses: the gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, and lead, everything that can withstand fire, you are to pass through fire, and it will be clean. It must still be purified with the purification water. Anything that cannot withstand fire, pass through on water. On the 7th day, wash your clothes, and you will be clean. After that, you may enter the camp." The Lord told Moses, "You, the priest Eleazar, and the family heads, the community, are to take count of what was captured, people and animals. Then divide the captives within the troops who went out of war in the entire community. Set aside a tribute for the Lord from what belongs to the fighting men who went out to war. 1 out of every 500 people, cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. Take the tribute from their half and give it to the priest Eleazar as a contribution to the Lord. From the Israelites' half, take 1 out of every 50 from the people, cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats, all the livestock, and give them to the Levites who perform the duties of the Lord's tabernacle." So Moses and the priest Eleazar did as the Lord commanded Moses. The captives remaining from the plunder the army had taken totaled 675,000 sheep and goats, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 people, all females, who had not gone to bed with a man. The half portion of those who went out to war numbered 337,500 sheep and goats, and the tribute to the Lord was 675 from the sheep and goats. From the 36,000 cattle, the tribute to the Lord was 72. From the 30,500 donkeys, the tribute to the Lord was 61. And from the 16,000 people, the tribute to the Lord was 32 people. Moses gave the tribute to the priest Eleazar as a contribution to the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses. From the Israelites' half, which Moses separated from the men who fought, the community's half was 337,500 sheep and goats, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. Moses took out of every 50 selected from the people the livestock of the Israelites' half. He gave them to Livlat, also performed the duties of the Lord's tabernacle as the Lord had commanded him. The officers who were over the thousands of the army, the commanders of thousands and hundreds, approached Moses and told him, "Your servants have taken a census of the fighting men under our command, and not one of us is missing. So we have presented to the Lord an offering of the gold articles each man found, armlets, bracelets, rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make anointment for ourselves before the Lord." Moses and the priest Eleazar received from them all the articles made out of gold, all the gold of the contribution they offered to the Lord. From the commander of thousands of hundreds was 420 pounds. Each of the soldiers had taken plunder for himself. Moses and the priest Eleazar received the gold from the commanders of thousands and hundreds and brought it into the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord. The Reubenites and Gadites had a very large number of livestock. When they surveyed the lands of Jazer and Gilead, they saw that the region was good for the livestock. So the Gadites and the Reubenites came to Moses, the priest Eleazar, and the leaders of the community, and said, "The territory of Ataroth, Dibron, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elilah, Sabim, Nebo, and beyond, which the Lord struck down before the community of Israel, is good land for livestock, and your servants own livestock." They said, "If we have found favor with you, let this land be given to our servants as a possession. Don't make us cross the Jordan." But Moses asked the Gadites and Reubenites, "Should your brothers go to war while you stay here? Why are you discouraging the Israelites from crossing into the land the Lord had given them? That's what your ancestors did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. After they went up as far as Eshcol Valley and saw the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land the Lord had given them. So the Lord's anger burned that day, and he swore on oath, because they did not remain loyal to me. None of the men 20 years or more who came from the Egypt will see the land I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. None except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, because they did remain loyal to the Lord. The Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until the whole generation that had done what was evil in the Lord's sight was gone. And here you, a brood of sinners, stand in your ancestors' place, adding even more to the Lord's burning anger against Israel. If you turn back from the following him, he will once again leave this people in the wilderness, and he will destroy all of them." Then they approached him and said, "We want to build sheep pens here for our livestock and cities for our dependents, but we will arm ourselves and be ready to go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them into their place. Meanwhile, our dependents will remain in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites had taken possession of his inheritance. Yet we will not have an inheritance with them across the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance will be across the Jordan to the east." Moses replied to them, "If you do this, if you arm yourselves for battle before the Lord, and every one of your armed men crosses the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven his enemies from the presence, and the land is subdued before the Lord, afterward you may return and be free from obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land will belong to you as possession before the Lord. But if you don't do this, you will certainly sin against the Lord. Be sure your sin will catch up to you. Build cities for your dependents and pens for your flocks, but do what you have promised." The Gadites and the Reubenites answered Moses, "Your servants will do just as the Lord commanded. Our dependents, wives, livestock, and all our animals remain here in the cities of Gilead. But your services are equipped for war before the Lord, and will go across to the battles as the Lord orders." So Moses gave orders about them to the priest Eleazar, Joshua son of Nun, and the family heads of the Israelite tribes. Moses told them, "If the Gadites and the Reubenites cross the Jordan with you, every man in battle formation before the Lord, and the land is subdued before you, you are to give them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they don't go across with you in the battle formation, they may accept the land from the Canaan with you." The Gadites and Reubenites replied, "What the Lord has spoken to your servants is what we will do. We will cross over in battle formation before the Lord into the land of Canaan, but we will keep our hereditary possession across the Jordan." So Moses gave them, the Gadites, Reubenites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, and the kingdom of King Sihon of the Amorites, and the kingdom of King Og of Bashan, the land including its cities with the territory surrounding them. The Gadites rebuilt Dibon, Ataroth, Adroth, Shaphan, Jazer, Jogabah, Beth Nemrah, and Beth Hamaran as fortified cities, and built sheep pens. The Reubenites rebuilt Heshbon, Elash, Kiriathim, and as well as Nebo and Baalmeon, whose names were changed. And Sibeah, they gave names to the cities they rebuilt. The descendants of Machir, son of Messiah, went to Gilad, captured it, and drove out the Amorites who were there. So Moses gave Gilad to the clan of Machir, son of Messiah, and they settled it in. Jar, a descendant of Manasseh, went and captured their villages, which he renamed Jer's villages. Norba went and captured Kenath with its surrounding villages and called it Nobad after his own name. These were the stages of the Israelite journey when they went out of the land of Egypt by their military divisions under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. At the Lord's command, Moses wrote down the starting points for the stages of their journey. These are the stages listed by their starting points. They traveled from Ramesses in the first month, on the 15th day of the month. On the day after the Passover, the Israelites went out defiantly in the sight of the Egyptians. Meanwhile, the Egyptians were bearing every firstborn male the Lord had struck down among them. The Lord had executed judgment against their gods. The Israelites traveled from Ramesses and camped at Succoth. They traveled from Succoth and camped at Etham, which is the edge of the wilderness. They traveled from Etham and turned back to Pi-hahiroth, which faces Baal-zephon, and they camped before Migdal. They traveled from Pi-hahiroth and crossed through the middle of the sea to the wilderness. They took a 3-day journey to the wilderness of Ethan and camped at Marah. They traveled from Marah and came to Elim. There were 12 springs and 70 date palms at Elim, so they camped there. They traveled from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. They traveled from the Red Sea and camped the wilderness of Sin. They traveled from the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dophikon. They traveled from Dophikon and camped at Alush. They traveled from Alush and camped at Rebiadim, where there was no water for the people to drink. They traveled from Rebiadim and camped at the wilderness of Sinai. They traveled from the wilderness of Sinai and camped at Kibroth Hattaavah. They traveled from Kibroth Hattaavah and camped at Hazeroth. They traveled from Hazeroth and camped at Rithmah. They traveled from Rithmah and camped at Rimmon Piers. They traveled from Rimmon Piers and camped at Libnah. They traveled from Libnah and camped at Rizal. They traveled from Rizal and camped at Kittihatha. They traveled from Kittihatha and camped at Mount Shepherd. They traveled from Mount Shepherd and camped at Hadadah. They traveled from Hadadah and camped at Markethloth. They traveled from Makaloth and camped at Telath. They traveled from Telath and camped at Terah. They traveled from Terah and camped at Mithika. They traveled from Mithika and camped at Hashemona. They traveled from Hashemona and camped at Moseroth. They traveled from Moseroth and camped at Ben Jacon. They traveled from Ben Jacon and camped at the Hor Haggadah. They traveled from Hor Haggadah and camped at Lebutha. They traveled from Jorbatha and camped at Abrana. They traveled from Abrana and camped at Izana Geber. They traveled from Izar Geber and camped at the wilderness of Zin. They traveled from the Kadesh and camped at the Mount Hor at the edge of the land of Edom. At the Lord's command, the priest Aaron climbed Mount Hor and died there on the first day of the 5th month. And in the 40th year, the Israelites went out in the land of Egypt. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. All that time, the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev in the land of Canaan, heard the Israelites were coming. They traveled from Mount Hor and camped at Zalamana. They traveled from Zalamana and camped at Punan. They traveled from Punan and camped at Oboth. They traveled from Oboth and camped at El Abrium on the border of Moab. They traveled from Eliam and camped at Dibigad. They traveled from Dibigad and camped at Alam Dibiam. They traveled from Alam Dibalatham and camped at the Abram range facing Nebo. They traveled from the Abram range and camped at the plains of Moab by the Jordan across the Jericho. They camped at the Jordan from Beth Jeshemoth and the Ezekiel meadow on the plains of Moab. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab at the Jordan across the Jericho. Tell the Israelites, when you cross the Jordan, the land of Canaan, you must drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. Destroy all the stone images and cast images and demolish all their high places. You are to take possession of the land and settle it in, because I have given you the land to possess. You are to receive the land as inheritance by lot, according by your clans. Increase the inheritance for a large clan and decrease it for a small one. Whatever place the lot indicates for someone will be his, You will receive inheritance according to your ancestral tribes. But if you don't drive out the inheritance of the land before you, those who are allowed to remain will become barbs for your eyes and thorns for your sides. They will harass you in the land where you will live, and what I have planned to do with them, I will do to you. Okay, guys, I will see y'all tomorrow.